Good morning, everyone. How are you? All the button pushing. This is Karen Curry Parker. I'm Karen Curry Parker. Welcome to Thursday. And on Thursdays, we talk about coaching and quantum human design and how human design becomes an adjunct tool to your coaching practice and how our understanding of the chart can and really support us in becoming better coaches, getting more information from the chart, having an awareness sometimes of where, because of their design, our clients are more vulnerable, and how to use this information to really serve our clients at the highest level. So I asked you yesterday, I asked you yesterday, what are some questions that you have that you'd like to explore with the chart and human design? And one of the questions that was posted was about how do you counsel someone or work with someone, coach with someone who's going through grief, and what do you see in the chart that might give you information to really support people through the grieving process? So I'm going to talk about that today. Just to show you, this isn't going to be super long. It's just going to show you some insights, some things that you might not realize are in the human design chart, and how that actually gives you more information about your clients and how you can help your clients. So let's look at grief and loss in the chart. So before we get into grief and loss in the chart, we have to explore what I think is some of the mythology around traditional human design, because there's some vocabulary in traditional human design that doesn't often speak well to our everyday experience of our designs. The thing that I really want to address specifically is the theme of love and caring, because it has been taught in traditional human design that there are aspects or circuits or gates and channels in the chart that are associated with not caring. And there's a conversation about certain parts of the chart don't have caring at their root. And there are parts of the chart that also have emotional energy. And if those parts, such as the emotional solar plexus, are open or undefined, it also leaves people questioning about whether they have feelings. And let me first of all start with reminding you that we all have all of the chart, and the emotional solar plexus especially is going to tell you how you're going to experience emotional energy, but you're not going to have feelings. Okay, we all have emotional energy, especially when we experience loss and grief. We are supposed to experience it. Okay, we are designed to be emotional beings. Emotional energy is actually an incredibly vital and important energy, because it's emotional energy that, as we go through the solar plexus mutation or the change or the shift in consciousness that's happening on the planet, our emotional energy becomes an energy frequency that we learn how to consciously harness as part of the creative process. And we all have it. Okay, we all have the ability to create with emotional energy. The definition in the emotional solar plexus really only tells us that people who are emotionally open have a tendency to get their emotional energy from the world around them. They experience emotional energy in a variety of different ways. But if you are emotionally open, you do still have feelings. If you have emotional definition, that means your feelings have an internal source and they fluctuate. And so for you, part of your lesson, your soul curriculum in life, is to learn how to find the baseline of your emotional experience and to not let the day-to-day or the week-by-week fluctuation of your internal emotional energy cause you to be reactive versus being deliberate. The other thing that I think happens when we talk about caring versus not caring through the lens of the chart is that starts to translate to love. When we say, well, if you don't care, you don't love, right? People who don't care don't love. And I want to show you in this next slide where love lives in the chart. Here's where love lives in the chart. Every single archetype in the human story is rooted in love. The question of what's the most loving way I can express this energy becomes the question that ultimately drives us in being able to consciously choose how to express the highest element of every archetype in the chart. So everyone loves, every part of the chart is regulated by love. Our direction in life is oriented with the quality of love that we experience. The monopole, that direction giving attractive force in the G center, is calibrated exclusively by the quality of love we have for ourselves and for the world. We are beings who are driven, if you will, by love. Everything in the chart is related to love. So there's nothing in the chart, there's no element in the chart that doesn't have, in some way, shape, or form, love at the heart of its soul curriculum. Individual circuitry, and there are 3 different individual circuitries, which, by the way, I like to call transformative circuitry. This is the circuitry that actually brings change, the possibility of mutation and transformation into the world. There are 3 individual circuits. There's the integration circuit, that's the one on the left. The centering circuit, that's the one in the middle. And the knowing circuit, that's the one on the right. These 3 circuits are most often associated in traditional human design with the idea that these circuits don't care. They don't have caring at their heart or their root. Now, the first thing that I want to point out to you is every single one of these circuits has the sacral defined in it. So the integration circuit has the sacral as part of it. The centering circuit has the sacral as part of it. The knowing circuit has the sacral as part of it. Every single one of these circuits has the G center, the center for love and direction in it. Okay, so I don't believe that individual circuitry doesn't care. Okay, individual circuitry absolutely cares. It's human. Caring is so vital that if we're not cared for, if we don't start our lives embedded, entrenched in the theme of caring, we die, literally. Or we have severe neurological impairment. And if you want to revisit the horror of the orphanages in Romania where the children laid in beds without being cared for, and what happened to their bodies and their neurological well-being when they weren't touched and cared for, we need caring, and we're all capable of caring. Caring is essential, and we all care. The difference with individual circuitry versus some of the other circuits is that individual circuitry is self-reflective. It cares by being aware of the sacredness of the change it brings into the world. And I will tell you, I know a lot of people who have a lot of heavy individual circuitry who care so much about the transformation they're here to bring into the world that they will die for it if I don't want them to, but they are so passionate about bringing change that they're willing to risk everything for it. That is caring. It's just not maybe romance. You know, this definition isn't always, unless you have, say, the 1222 or the 3955, this definition isn't always about romance and flowers and all those things that we associate with caring. But this circuitry absolutely cares. And because if you have a lot of individual circuitry and it has you care, if you have a loss or you experience a loss, it will impact you and you will also feel grief. I do find that when we look at grief and grieving and loss, that the circuitry that does tend to be the most impacted by loss is tribal circuitry. Because tribal circuitry is all about building those bonds of community and relationship that strengthen sustainability and the ability to be resilient and enduring in the world. And certainly there is nurturing and connection and relationship deeply embedded in tribal circuitry. And if you're coaching someone who has heavy definition in tribal circuitry and they experience a loss, they very often can experience that loss or have a longer grieving process or grieving cycle because they're hardwired differently. So this tribal circuitry can sometimes be a signifier in chart analysis. If you're working with a client, coaching a client through grief, and they have a lot of tribal circuitry defined in their chart, this can be someone who very often really has a longer grieving process because part of their identity, if you will, part of their oftentimes their energy that was occupied in being in relationship with this person or this dog or cat or whatever the loss might be, their energy, part of their energy has gone into nurturing that relationship. And it's a very big disruptive cycle. It's a big disruptive cycle for anyone. It just can impact people with tribal circuitry more. This becomes especially true when we look at either the channel 4037, that's the one connecting the will center, the red triangle, to the emotional solar plexus, that's the brown triangle on the right, or between the root center and the solar plexus, that's the brown square on the bottom and the right triangle on the right, the 1949. Both of these energies are about intimacy, marriage, connection, community, agreements, the social contracts that we make with each other. And certainly, if you see these two channels or any of these two channels defined in a chart, these can be channels that will also indicate that there could be a significant grieving process. I also find this to be true if you're looking at children who are maybe going through a divorce, that the children with these configurations who go through the experience of a divorce oftentimes have a harder time adjusting. They always are in a state of missing one or the other, the parent, and they miss their family. The good news is that, especially with the 1949, that's the channel from the root to the emotional solar plexus, if you have definition here, one thing you can help people with when they have this particular channel and they experience a loss or they're grieving is they can heal better sometimes if they have a pet, especially children, a dog or a cat, a mammal pet, a four-legged furry pet. That animal brings this energy into the relationship because mammalian circuitry brings this energy in, and oftentimes having a companion animal can help with the grieving process. And I often suggest to parents, if they're getting divorced and their children have this as part of their chart, even if they have one gate versus a channel, even if they have the gate 19 or the gate 49, also if they have the gate 5 or the gate 15, by the way, too, that having a pet and being able to take that pet from each parent's home. So the dog goes with the kid or the cat goes with the kid instead of the dog being in one home and the kid only getting to see the dog periodically. If they have a mammal friend, a furry friend they can bring with them, it helps a lot. Okay. Also, nature and being outside can be very restorative and healing for anybody with this configuration. And sometimes being in nature can help with if you have these configurations and you're dealing with grief and loss. The other part too sometimes is the open spleen center. That's the white triangle on the left. If you have somebody that has an undefined spleen, sometimes when the spleen is open and somebody experiences grief and loss, because there's a tendency in the shadow side of the open spleen to hold on to things for longer than you should, sometimes that open spleen can hold on to the grieving process for a long time, and it takes longer under those circumstances for the grieving process to be resolved. And I want to talk for just a second about the resolution of the grieving process, because we talk about the grieving process as if somehow you're going to get over it. And the reality of it is, and I think from a coaching perspective, this is important to consider, you don't get over it. What's really happening is you're redefining your story. And that redefinition of who you are means you incorporate a new relationship, a different kind of a relationship with the person or the creature that you lost. And sometimes people do that by cultivating a multidimensional relationship with their loved one. They talk to their loved one, through interdimensional communication. They will dream about their loved one. They'll think about or feel their loved one watching over them. When we look at grief, everyone goes through these stages of grief. The stages of grief are denial. That's the shock of, oh my God, how could this happen? Anger. I have a friend who lost her husband, and for like a whole year, she was really angry at him for dying. Bargaining. That's that whole, well, if I just could do this or do that, maybe this will change. Maybe the situation will change. Maybe my partner will come back. Depression is sort of feeling the sadness, if you will, about the situation, and acceptance is that integrating that new narrative, that new story. The one thing I just want to throw out here is that your clients will go through grief about a lot of different things, and they'll actually go through different stages of grief around different life circumstances, not just the loss or the death of someone. Sometimes we go through grief over the loss of a job. Sometimes we go through grief if we lose our ability to have more children. Sometimes we go through the stages in grief when we graduate from college, or we go through a major life cycle change. So we all do experience grief around different things in different ways. And if you're going through grief, especially if you've had a major event that is a grief event, you're not just going to go through these grief stages linearly. It's cyclical, and sometimes you'll go through two of these stages simultaneously, and sometimes something will trigger it and you'll go all the way back to the beginning of denial. And it takes time. And no matter how much time it takes, there's no formula for it. And everybody's going to have their own journey and their own process through the grief process. So coaching people through grieving is sometimes tricky because there is no formula. People make terrible formulas. There's no formula for being a human ever, anywhere. Just saying. And if you're my student, I say this to my students a lot, and to be patient with your clients who go through grief, or if you yourself are going through grief, to know that it does take time, and you won't necessarily go through all of these cycles in order. And sometimes you may bop back and forth, and all of it is okay. All of it is okay. At the heart of healing grief is this. When we go through grief, we're basically redefining our personal narrative. If you go back to the coaching model that I've been sharing, that most people are looking for coaching because they've experienced some kind of disruptive event. They've had a loss, or they've had a change in their definition, or something has happened to their health or their finances, or they've had an awareness. Maybe somebody got up one day and looked in the mirror and said, I hate my life. They've had some kind of disruption in the narrative, the personal story they tell about who they are. Oftentimes, when we shift that story, especially if that story is triggered because of a loss, it kicks us into a state that's called the void or liminality. And when we're sitting in that void state, we're not who we were anymore. We're not who we were anymore. But we don't necessarily know who we are now, and we don't know who we are becoming. So part of your role as a grief coach, or in coaching people through grief or healing through grief, is really working with them to redefine their personal narrative. They might no longer be a wife. That's a redefinition. They might no longer be a child of someone. They might be, their parents may be dead. That causes them to go through a radical redefinition of their personal narrative. So it really is powerful as a coach to really work with your clients in defining who were you, who are you now, and as the grief process begins to heal and resolve itself a bit, to really explore the next question: who are you becoming? Who do you want to be with this new iteration, if you will, of your life story? Of course, the chart gives powerful insights into crafting a new narrative. Understanding the parts of the chart, the archetypes in the chart, really helps you as a coach give your clients a template, an insight, the vocabulary, if you will, for how to write a new story about who they are now on the other side of this experience of loss. So I want to end today, and I really appreciate this conversation that somebody initiated. I'm so sorry, I forgot your name, who posted this yesterday underneath my video. But today marks the 3rd year anniversary for me of the loss of one of my very, very dear friends, Martin Jordan. So 3 years ago today, he passed away. And I miss him. I miss him a lot. And I am grateful that I got something to respond to share with today. And I just, again, want to say to all of you, the grief process is a redefinition of your narrative. And you have at your fingertips, as somebody who understands human design, the ability to give somebody a new, more empowered story. And if you yourself are going through grief, be kind to yourself, be patient, and know that the grieving process takes time, and there is no end point in it. There's only a new point in the process. and you get to define the process however it works for you. And at the end, you don't get over people. You integrate a new relationship with people who are not physically here, but who are spiritually with us all the time. So thank you all for joining me today. Have a great day. Tomorrow we'll be going back and revisiting sustainability in the chart and what you need to do to stay sustainable in your coaching practice, and how you can craft for yourself authentic alignment through understanding the story that your personal chart is telling you about yourself and your soul curriculum. In the meantime, have a great day. I will see you guys tomorrow.